Rick Zamperin, and this is the CHCH Newsmakers podcast. The world is watching because for the very first time, Canada is hosting the FIFA World Cup. The U.S. and Mexico are also co-hosting the 2026 edition of the global soccer tournament. And with 48 teams participating, it is the biggest competition yet. And with it comes a massive economic uplift, or at least that's what we've been told. Joining us is Tyeshia Redden, Assistant Professor of Urban Planning at the University of Toronto. Professor Redden, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Historically, do FIFA World Cup host cities see an economic spike?
Usually there is a blip in GDP, but typically the long-term financial benefits tend to be very overstated. If anyone benefits in the long term from the economic stimulus, it's definitely FIFA.
Now, we're going to get to that in a moment, but Canada, there's officials who are saying, listen, we've spent $1 billion. We're going to get $4 billion back in revenue. Do you believe the hype?
The data just doesn't bear that out, right? Going back the last 20 years of World Cup events. So what tends to happen is that there is an incentive to have these very positive and in some cases inflated economic projections, right? But let's say that Canada will see $4 billion in revenues from this $1 billion in taxpayer investment, right? Then the question becomes, how evenly will that $4 billion be distributed around the country, right? Will provinces who are not hosting see stimulus from that? Will people who are not entrepreneurs, who have these direct vendor contracts, actually see that? Will our local small, like mom and pop businesses, restaurants, tour guides, that sort of thing, will they see the particular benefits? Then becomes the question.
There have been some stadium investments as well, in particular at BMO Field, which is called Toronto Stadium for the tournament, and a little bit at BC Place Stadium in Vancouver. Do those investments create a ripple effect when it comes to economic uplift?
Perhaps. Right. And this is the problem with these economic projections. They rely on a lot of ifs. Right. And so I think that Toronto saw like $360 million investment in stadium upgrades, right? Again, this depends on how much revenue these stadiums are going to see in the future. Will that investment have actually made a significant difference in the revenues they would have accrued anyway, right? Also, there have been some plans on the part of City of Toronto, to make sure that some of these vendor contracts go to racialized minority business owners, to firms that are ran or owned by women, also some programs to funnel youth into employment training. A lot of this is very dependent on a contingency of different factors, right? So even the youth employment sounds good, but are the youth going to be trained in sort of the high wage sectors of this industry, like logistics, like event management, or are they going to be trained in service and hospitality, which tends to be on the lower wage earning sides, right? So I think this is why we have to be very critical about these projections, and we have to kind of parse out what are all these interdependencies that they rely on.
You spoke about a number of ifs. If certain things happen, if all the things are realized, and I understand that's probably not going to happen, but if they were, would we see those projections kind of come to life? That, the $4 billion in revenue and all this economic uplift?
If all of those things go well and work together the way they're supposed to, I think the best case scenario is there will be economic stimulus. Perhaps it does reach the $4 billion mark, but it will not be evenly distributed.
All right, you mentioned that FIFA is a big winner in this. How so? How is the organization, the governing body of the sport of football or soccer in North America, win in this regard?
Well, FIFA's estimated revenues are about $10 billion. right? And that's quite a tidy sum considering that FIFA doesn't bring any physical infrastructure to this at all, right? If we were talking about a traditional event planner, you would have a group or an organization or a person that would come to a city that would handle all the upfront costs themselves. They would reap the revenues and profits, pay taxes, and leave. In this case, though, FIFA goes to these different cities, these different nations, right? Uses all of their physical infrastructure, has those countries pay the upfront costs, while FIFA reaps in the revenues from direct ticket sales, from corporate sponsorships, from broadcasting rights. I mean, it's great work if you can get it, right? In this way, FIFA is really, I would argue, was really one of the pioneers for some of these tech models that we see today, right? Like, I think of like how Uber is essentially a taxi company that doesn't have to buy any cars, right? This is what FIFA is, right? FIFA is essentially a sporting organization that's never had to build a stadium.
So in this case, 2026 World Cup is in Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. What's in it for these nations?
It differs.
Okay.
Right? We also have to be mindful of the fact that I caution my students about, vibes and to stay grounded in the data. But I find myself getting caught up. Does Toronto feel like a city that's hosting the World Cup right now? Like, I'm accustomed to a certain energy and electricity through the city. And we're not just talking about, one city hosting the World Cup. We're in this momentous occasion where a continent is hosting the World Cup, right? This very rare feat of Canada and the United States and Mexico seemingly being on the same page and this huge cultural moment. And it doesn't quite feel that way. In fact, it actually feels very disjointed, very disconnected. I'm sure that the political state of my home country, of the United States, probably plays a large role in that. The perhaps rosiest ideas around this is that the World Cup would have brought international attention, acclaim, and praise to the continent, to each of these countries. Each of these countries would also have shared in the projected economic stimulus, right? I don't know if we're seeing that being borne out, though.
Do you feel the political uncertainty, we'll just call it that, is kind of taking away from the buzz around the tournament?
Sure. Right. There's a lot of controversy around the U.S.'s their federal agents, ICE, being at events. We're seeing opening matches like tomorrow's match at SoFi Stadium for the World Cup, renamed Los Angeles Stadium, where we have the union, Unite Here Local 11, who 96% of their membership voted to go on strike, primarily for labor and wage disputes, but also because they're demanding a guarantee that ICE will not enter the venues, right? We're also seeing a breakdown in some of the strategic planning around the World Cup, particularly travel and tourist destinations, because of this political climate. So, for instance, Canada was not expecting to get as many visitors as it probably will get, because so many people have decided in the kind of ensuing months to not go to the United States, because there have been so many issues with people obtaining visas, with people being harassed on a racial and ethnic basis by ICE agents, right? And so that is also kind of trickled down into some strategic and infrastructural issues in terms of Canada's healthcare system, and also transit systems kind of actually maintaining their integrity while experiencing the surge that wasn't necessarily projected when the World Cup was bid for or planned for.
Speaking of surges, we know that ticket prices in many instances have gone through the roof. Hotel accommodations with surge pricing in effect. This is the first time ever that 3 countries are co-hosting the World Cup, and the expanse from Canada all the way down to Mexico. That's a large body of land. That's also impacting things, isn't it?
Sure. I think one of the major themes around the World Cup this year is affordability, right? I've been listening to so many stories from dedicated fans, people who attend the World Cup, um, year after year, decade after decade, who talk, with great reverence about the years of $50 tickets, right? And we're in a moment where we're seeing World Cup tickets top out at six figures, right? So people are left wondering, is the World Cup for the average fan, right? For the ordinary person? And really for their families, right? Some people can only attend the World Cup by themselves because of these ticket prices. We've also seen, interestingly enough, this kind of, as I spoke of before, this kind of interesting dynamic between the tech industry and sporting. We're also seeing dynamic pricing on behalf of FIFA. Essentially, where there's more demand, prices are increasing, right? And so FIFA has rolled out a couple of new things this year. One, category seating, where there have been claims that seating changes have been made at the last minute by FIFA, where fans have paid for particular types of seating and are getting much worse views and seating choices. We've also seen the holding back of tickets, creating this sort of artificial scarcity. And FIFA has also set up a secondary resale market for its tickets where it gets a cut of those resale tickets. So essentially, FIFA can sell the same ticket multiple times. And the organization has been quite frank that the US's lack of consumer protections has actually made this World Cup a meaningful opportunity for FIFA to essentially charge as much as it possibly can. Because if the World Cup were being held in another locality, say Europe with, its European Union regulations, it would not be as lucrative.
And now we know why that $10 billion is $10 billion when it comes to FIFA. What about when it comes to tourism? Is this going to put certain cities on the map, so to speak, in terms of tourists visiting venues, going to games, or maybe going to a pub to enjoy the World Cup action, and then months or years from now coming back to that city?
Sure. We've known for decades now that mega sporting events like the World Cup and the Olympics are actually catalysts for gentrification and for redevelopment. Cities have long used these mega sporting events to deploy social narratives about themselves, whether it's to lean into particular imaginaries, right? Or whether it is to reimagine how we think of particular places. I tend to think about the 1980 Moscow Olympics, in which Russia was trying to kind of reposition itself in the global imaginary. And so their mascot was like this teddy bear, right? Or Beijing's 2008 Olympics, which sent a very different message when the whole world watched like over 1,000 drummers beating their drums in sync, right? And so cities have long used these mega sporting events as an opportunity to, one, showcase themselves as tourist destinations, but also to signal to private capital that they are open for business, that they are an appealing place to either park or build your wealth. Right. And so I think there are some real concerns from grassroots organizations in a lot of these different localities, whether it be Vancouver, Toronto, Atlanta, Los Angeles, about the long-term effect of essentially showcasing the cities in such a commercialized way.
When it comes to the Olympics, it has been a tough sell for some host cities to say, okay, yeah, we'll host the games because of the price tag and the responsibility, obviously, that goes around with it, with security and whatnot. Do you see the World Cup kind of going in that direction?
I think there's an opportunity for cities and nations to have more leverage when it comes to negotiating these host deals. We've seen this with the Olympics. After Greece went bankrupt and cited the 2004 Athens Games as 3 to 4% of their national debt, there was a decreased enthusiasm on the part of a lot of developed countries to host these games anymore. I remember that Boston was the US's original 2024 host city candidate. And after a city referendum, residents of Boston's voted down hosting the Olympics, and Mayor Walsh, I believe, stated that they would not mortgage the future of their city for the Olympics. Here in Canada, even, I remember that the Winter Olympic Stadium was known as the Big O because of its shape, and then in the years following became known as the Big O, OWE, because of the exorbitant cost to actually maintain the facility, right? And so I think when it comes to hosting these games, what we've seen on the Olympic side is, starting with Paris 2024, the IOC actually allowed Paris, and will allow future cities, to use a lot more of their existing infrastructure, so they don't have to build these huge stadiums that they may not fill to capacity again after these events. They also lowered the price of the bid proposal. A lot of people don't realize the bid proposals cost a lot of money. There was a lot of controversy after Chicago spent over $100 million on its failed bid for the 2016 Olympics, right? And so we're seeing, because there was a decline in candidate host cities, we saw the IOC start to be more flexible with its kind of standards for the event, allowing cities to lower their upfront costs. I think there's an opportunity in doing so for the World Cup as well.
Great point. I'll end with this question. I want you to look into your crystal ball. What do you think the legacy of this World Cup is going to be? Not necessarily on the U.S. and Mexico, but certainly Canada, because this is the first time that we're hosting the event.
Sure. I think culturally, Canadian fans are some of the best in the world, and I think there are going to be some great moments to really exalt some of the shared values of these mega sporting events, like fraternity, right? Like sportsmanship. I wonder, on the social infrastructure side of things, and certainly physical infrastructure side of things, if hosting the World Cup will actually have lasting legacies that will improve the lives of everyday Canadians outside of the provinces and the cities that are actually hosting.
Well, let's hope that somehow, some way happens. I know it's a big lift for some. Professor Redden, thank you so much for your time today, and enjoy the World Cup.
You too. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks for checking out the Newsmakers podcast, and a big thanks to the all-star cast behind the scenes. If you liked today's episode, click the thumbs up, hit subscribe. You can also leave a comment as well. Catch the Newsmakers podcast on chch.com/podcasts and wherever you get your favorite podcasts.